What's happening, everybody? Matt Bell here at the Electric Violin Shop in sunny Durham, North Carolina. It's a nice day out today. I'm looking out the window. Very sunny. It's peachy. We're doing well here. Thank you guys for joining us. We're going to be talking today a little bit about mono versus stereo. We've had some questions about that on emails and phone calls and all that sort of thing. People who are a little confused about how the mono versus stereo thing works. And yeah, there's been some confusion between mono and or stereo and dual mono, what that is as well. And we'll clear some of that up. Before we go any further, we've had a lot of people ask, what do we use to polish or clean electric violins, the ones with painted finishes? We're not talking about like your classical violin that has a varnish on it. We're talking about painted finishes like this one or this one or this one, which is really nice, by the way. This is what Chris discovered. This is what he likes to use, Jescar. It's a scratch and swirl remover. I don't do any of this kind of work because I'm too lazy. But Chris says that this stuff is a miracle drug, that it works amazing, that if your finish is all sort of wonky and tired on your instrument, that this is the stuff right here. This is the stuff. If you find this, you'll be happy. And I would now like a sponsorship deal from Jescar. Okay. So mono versus stereo. Let's talk about that. What is stereo, right? So the question is, what is the difference between mono and stereo? And we got to know what stereo is. We know what mono is, right? Mono is when you just have one signal coming out of your instrument, and that goes to the PA, right? That's mono, uno, solo, one. All those words mean the same thing. So you have one signal coming from your instrument to the PA or to an amplifier or whatever. Stereo, the reason they came up with stereo is because you got two ears, one on either side of your head, one on the right side and one on the left side. So if you put a set of headphones on and you've got something different coming out of this ear than what's coming out of this ear, that's stereo. And it sounds really good if you use it right. If we do what's called panning, which is to push something to one side or the other. And it doesn't have to be a hard pan. That's the other thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that's a wheel. It's not a switch. So you can pan something a little bit to one side, and what it does is it sounds like it's coming from here instead of here, or sounds like it's coming from here. It doesn't have to be all the way over here. It doesn't have to be all the way over here. You can actually, that's called soft panning. A hard pan is when I take it out of the left channel and put it in the right channel, or vice versa. A soft pan is where I push it sort of off to one side a little bit, okay? So that's soft panning and panning in stereo. But stereo means, the difference between stereo and dual mono, stereo means that the left channel and the right channel, and I just did it backwards, the left channel and the right channel are different. Dual mono is if I have the exact same thing in the left side as I do in the right side. I think that Facebook actually allows me to stream in stereo, which means you are receiving a stereo transmission from me right now. I got one mic, it's right here, which means that if you're receiving, what you're receiving from me is actually dual mono, because I'm only sending one signal. The left channel and the right channel are exactly the same. So if you put a set of headphones on, the right channel, left channel are exactly the same. It's not really stereo, it's actually dual mono. Now, if I had two microphones in here, I had a microphone here and a microphone here, then that would be stereo. You would actually be able to hear the room around. If I came closer to one side or closer to the other side, you would hear that side get louder or the other side get quieter. That would be true stereo. So stereo versus mono means that the two sounds are different. There's two channels and they're different. Okay? So it means I have two separate signals, right and left. It means that they are different. Now, what does that mean in a live setting? If I have a stereo signal going to front of house, it means that they have to have a stereo PA for that to really mean anything. Okay? Now, I will say there's a caveat here. A lot of piano signals, you see keyboards will have a left and a right output, and keyboard players, because they're difficult, will usually insist, I've got to have both. I got to have both going out. Now, maybe they do, maybe they don't know that front of house is actually mono, but because both their left channel and right channel are different coming out of there, those pianos generally have left and right are different, so they are truly stereo, that they need both of those signals, both of those channels to come out. You got one in channel 15, one in channel 16 or whatever, and if I'm a front of house guy, I just link them so that when I fade one side up, the other side goes up too. And it means I've got both sounds, but they're only coming out of one speaker because I've got mono PA, which means all of my speakers, even if I have two stacks of speakers, they're not different. They're the same, which means they're dual mono, not stereo. So a stereo signal coming to me as an engineer from a piano player, his left channel and his right channel do sound different, but I'm pushing both of those through the same speaker. So you don't get a panning difference. If I sit on one side of the audience, it sounds exactly the same as if I sit on the other side. It just means that because maybe their left channel is where the left hand plays, it's going to be a little bassier, and the right hand is going to be where the right hand plays. Maybe it's a little treblier. It means that I'm actually getting that full spectrum of sound, but it's not panned. It's going through one speaker. So that's a stereo to mono conversion. So if you really want your stereo signal to matter, then you need to have a stereo PA, which means if I got two stacks of speakers, the left one and the right one are actually separately controllable from front of house. Now, that means that my room has to be set up such that that's a good idea. Okay, if I've got my piano pan hard left and pan hard right, then the people on the right side are going to hear something different. The audience sitting on the right side is going to hear something different from what the audience on the left side hears. That can be a bit of a problem. Now, if I have my effects set up that way, maybe I've got the dry sound of the piano coming dual mono. It's both, it's coming, it's centered. But I've got, maybe there's some delays or some reverbs that are stereo. Maybe on my delay it goes hello, 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 right? So if I've got that going on, then the people on the right side hearing a different show from the people on the left side, that's not really a problem. Okay, the people in the center are sort of getting this stereo image, but you've got to understand it's not like your home theater where you're sort of sitting in the middle of the room and the speakers are outside of you. In a live music setting, a lot of times the crowd is here and the speakers are not on the outside of them. I can't really hear the speaker that's on the other side of the room. I can really only hear the speaker that's in front of me. So if I'm trying to run a stereo PA system, there's a lot of people in the room that are not getting a stereo show. They're just getting half of a stereo show. Okay, so I have to make sure that I've got a room that works well for that stereo PA. If I've got my speakers spread out nice and wide, and I've got most of my people sitting in the center so they're actually hearing both speakers, then stereo effects can be a good thing. The other thing I might want to think about is if I'm sending a right and a left, maybe I'm going to ask my engineer, hey, don't hard pan these, maybe soft pan them, maybe push one, 70%, 30%, whatever, so that the people over here don't miss half of my delay. If my delay is a hard ping pong delay and the people on one side of the room are only hearing half of my delay, they're actually hearing hello, 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 hello. They're hearing it's not going to sound good. Okay. Why would we do stereo? Okay, it sounds like, gosh, this is a lot of trouble to go through to do stereo. Well, it does. That when we have a room where you can hear both speakers, it does create a lot of spread in space, and it gives things depth. And create space. We have stereo reverbs that sound really cool, man, especially if you've got headphones on or if you're in a room where you're sitting between the two speakers. Stereo reverbs sound really good. Stereo delays sound cool where we've got a bounce from one side to the other. The band that I used to tour with, we had our stereo PA. Now he ran everything more or less mono, but our engineer had the ability to have a different EQ on one side than the other. If you're playing in an asymmetrical room, say the stage is on one side, say you're in a corner of the room and there's a big bulk of the room off here, but then there's like windows running right down the side. Well, those windows, because they're diaphragms, they can actually really change what people are hearing on that side of the room. And say that side of the room is just, wow, it's really bright over here compared to what people on the other side of the room is doing. He could dial down some of the highs on that one side so that the people standing on that one side weren't getting their scalps peeled back while everybody else was enjoying a nice show. So the ability to have, in an asymmetrical room, the ability to do separate EQ on one side or the other makes sense. The other thing, you may want to do separate processing. And what does that mean, having separate processing? I do a lot of really distorted sounds, and I get all my distortion sound from amp models. I might want to run 2 amps. Maybe I've actually got a setup in my Helix now where I like having a Friedman model and a Bogner model. The Bogner model gives me a lot of real bottom-endy, just heavy, thick, bottom-heavy stuff. The Friedman is a little brighter. So if I've got I don't really want the Friedman by itself because it doesn't have enough hind end in it for me. And I don't really want the Bogner by itself because it's not crisp enough. So I can use dual amps. Well, if I'm stereo, I can actually push my Bogner a little heavier on one side and the Friedman a little heavier on the other side, because there's sort of, it's not, I don't want necessarily, I want this exact tone. I sort of feel like there's an acceptable window of tone. And so maybe I'm going to push the left side a little on this side of the window. Maybe my left side is going to be a hair brighter and my right side is going to be a hair heavier. Well, that's cool because it sort of gives some space. And I actually time delay one of them about 6 milliseconds, which is about how far sound travels in 6 feet. So it's like I got one amp that's maybe 6 feet closer to you than the other, and it does give it a thicker, fuller sound. So maybe I'll have one side is delayed a little bit and thicker, and the other side is a little more present. And that's fine. It's not a super hard pan that I do with that. So dual amps is one thing that you might want to run stereo. Some of your filters and mods are stereo filters and mods. Maybe there's a phaser. And if you guys don't know what a phaser is, it's a thing you're listening and it goes, and you can change the frequencies and all that. That's doing that. It really spreads and fattens up your sound. Well, sometimes there's actually 2 of those phasers going at once. And when you've got that set up in a stereo thing, man, it sounds ginormous. It sounds really cool. So if you've got a left and a right on your phaser or your flanger, or maybe there's a tremolo that's got a stereo deal to it, some of those filters and mods can sound really cool in stereo. There's another sort of a wet-dry thing you can do, and there's actually a lot of people that run 3 amps. They want a wet, wet. So what they'll do is they will split their signal and they will run their dry signal in the middle. Maybe they'll have their amp behind them on the stage with just their dry signal. And then they have stereo on either side, just the effects. So it's just my reverb or just my delay that is coming through those other 2 speakers. So my dry sound's coming out of the middle, and then my wet sound, just the delay. So when I say hello, that comes out the center speaker, and then the response, hello, comes out of the left and the right speaker. So you're actually getting a 3-way sound. That's a really cool way to do that wet, dry, wet sound. And then also maybe if I'm working with an engineer in a big boomy room, maybe I want to send him stereo, that I'm sending my dry signal out of the left and I'm sending all my effects or my wet, if I'm just using reverb and delays, I send those out of the right side. And he has the ability to control those out front. Say my room, say not nearly as many of your friends showed up as you were hoping, and the room is not full. Well, maybe what you're sending is going to be too wet because there's a bunch of reverb sort of happening in the room itself. And the engineer's like, yeah, it's all kind of swallowed up in this empty room because none of your friends showed up. They all said they were going to, but they didn't. That would never happen. So then your engineer out front, he or she has the ability to say, yeah, there's a little too much wetness going on here, and they can dial that back. So wet and dry is kind of a nice thing that gives your engineer a little more control if you trust your engineer. If you don't trust your engineer, get a new one. And then also, if we're going to do multiple effects, there's some really cool stuff you can do if you want to, say, have a flanger on one side and a phaser on the other, or if you just want a reverb on one side and a maybe a hall sound on one side and a chamber on the other. I don't know. There's 1,000 crazy creative things that you can do. Just sort of have an idea of where people are going to be sitting in a room, and don't necessarily always think that your core audience is sitting in the center and speakers firing at them from the side, that, hey, everybody's actually hearing a stereo sound. You're going to have some people that are going to sit on one side, and they're basically going to get a mono show, and they're only getting half of your show. So you got to think about that a little bit. If you're recording and all this is going to people's cars or their headphones or whatever, now all bets are off, because if they only hear half the show, well, that's their stinking fault, not yours. So those are the whys on why we would do stereo, and it kind of infers what the why nots are. Why would we not do stereo? Well, most PA systems are mono PA systems. Most sound systems are not going to be set up with a separate right and left channel. And then, they're going to throw your left channel to one side and your right to the other. If you're sending stereo signal, 9 times out of 10, the engineer's just going to put them both. He's going to put, channel 18 and 19. He's going to link them. And when one goes up, the other goes up. When one goes down, the other goes down. Most rooms, most concert halls are actually, they're pretty much set up for mono because of where the speakers are placed. And like we said before, you don't want half of your audience only hearing half of the show. It's also fewer channels. Like I said, you're going to have to send two channels. In a lot of places, you're going to be limited by that. I mean, your drummer is already sending 6 to 8 channels, kick, snare, hat, rack, all these different channels he's sending. If it's a decent sized band, at some point they're going to be like, hey, we're out of channels. Okay. We've only got 24 channels and your band wants to use 30 because everybody thinks they need to be running in stereo. Just from physical limitations, the fact that you've got more channels can occasionally be a problem. And because simpler is easier. It's simpler. It's easy. It's half as much work. Running cables and buying DIs and all that kind of stuff. So unless there's a really good reason to run stereo, like, hey, this is really going to enhance the audience experience, it's just easier to run mono. It's easier. All right. So suppose we've decided, yes, it is worth the trouble. We actually do want to run stereo. How does that happen? Because your instrument's mono. There's only one signal coming out of your violin, viola, cello, bass, whatever. There's only one signal, so it's mono. Most of your effects pedals are going to be mono pedals. Your wah pedal is probably it's a mono wah pedal. If you've got a distortion pedal, it's a mono distortion pedal. Your EQ little pedal, if you've got a G7 or whatever, those are mono pedals. All your preamps and stuff are mono pedals. If you want to run stereo, you're going to have to split to stereo as late in the chain as possible, unless you've got a bunch of stereo effects. And what that means is at some point I've got to split from being a single signal, say that 20 times fast. A single signal is going to have to be split to 2, and then each of those are processed separately and then sent to either amps or the front of house separately. So at some point, my signal is going to split. The further down the chain I can do that, the fewer stereo pedals I have to buy, or the fewer pedals, period. If I say, hey, I want a phaser on one side and a flanger on the other, if I'm buying pedals for $200 to $800 or $900 a piece, I'd rather not have to buy 2 flanger pedals just because I want one on each side. So try to split to stereo as far down the line as you can. And then you're going to have 2 DIs and 2 separate signals either going to your amp or to front of house. So instrument is mono. Most of your effects are mono. When you split to go to stereo, now you got double the cables, double the power supplies, double the trouble. How do you like that? Double the trouble. So go late if you can. All right. Those are all the slides I got. That's how we ended up at the little YouTube thing there. So no questions so far. I guess that's good. Either I'm explaining this well or everyone has said, yeah, Matt, we already knew all this. So, okay. Well, hopefully this conversation has been helpful for some of you guys. I do want to alert you to the presence of our YouTube channel. This video is going to be on our YouTube channel. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you're like, yeah, duh, I'm already watching it on YouTube. If you're watching this on Facebook, be aware that we have a YouTube channel. All these live streams do go to YouTube. And then there's some other content that also ends up on YouTube. And that's a great place to find answers to a lot of the questions that you might have. The other thing is our website. We get a ton of questions about how much does this cost, and what color is available in this, and what do you have in stock, and et cetera, et cetera. The answer to all those is on our website. So if you're asking how much does that red Cantini violin in the center of the picture, I don't memorize these things. I have to go to the website to look it up. You could also go to the website and look it up. How do you like that? So that's what's going on there. So YouTube, great resource. Our website, electricviolinshop.com, another great resource. Instagram is another great resource. Totally separate set of content on Instagram. Twitter, same deal. So all of the social medias. We do not TikTok just yet because I'm a terrible dancer. But maybe at some point we're going to hire somebody who can dance and they're going to do a TikTok channel for you. Maybe. Maybe I'm going to take dance lessons. I got nothing else to do during quarantine. Maybe I'll learn how to dance. So yeah, thank you guys for hanging out. Thanks for coming by on a Wednesday, and we will see you guys next week. Oh yeah, happy Canada Day today to all our Canadian friends. Happy 4th of July this weekend. To American friends, people who don't live in the U.S. or Canada, happy 50% of the way through the year. I'm a little tempted to not ask, holy crap, what more can this year throw at us? But maybe we're a second half team. And maybe the rest of this year is going to be amazing. We're going to be like, yeah, the first half of the year was totally worth it. Not really shaping up like that, but maybe could happen. Okay? You guys have a great weekend, and we will see you next week. Hoo-ah. Where am I going? I'm going to here.